Welcome to OSAA's STEM series. Today, we will be talking about the role of STEM in shaping Africans' mindset on sustainable development. STEM education is a teaching philosophy that integrates science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in order to deliver solutions to real-world problems. The fourth industrial revolution is characterized by very strong and solid scientific and mathematical principles and knowledge, advanced engineering skills and practices in order to create innovative technologies that have had and do have a massive impact on society. These creative and innovative technologies affect the way we do business. They affect the way we communicate. They affect the way we manage our health. However, for these innovative technologies to continue to have this sort of massive and significant impact, it requires systems thinking and often policy change. The current trend in Africa is to use African-led solutions to solve African challenges. That will be the core of our discussion today. My name is Winifred Ereyi. I'm the CEO of Think STEM Foundation. I'm also a member of the STEM Working Group. Joining me are members from the STEM Working Group. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. Sikelo Dube, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Winfrida. My name is Sikelo Dube. I am passionately known as the STEM Lady. I am the Zimbabwe Science Ambassador. My work has a lot to do with girls in STEM. I'm a passionate science entrepreneur, an educator, an innovator, and I believe that the young people, especially the girls in STEM, are the torchbearers of the future we want if we solve problems in our community using the STEM that we learn in the classroom. Thank you.
Dr. Beatrice Ijenga, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Beatrice Hamati Jenga. I'm an environmentalist and an educationist. Currently, I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor at the International Leadership University, where our focus is on leadership, as the name suggests, and also on integrity, because we believe in every sphere of knowledge, skill, and endeavor. Leadership and leaders of integrity are what are going to make the difference for Africa, even as we apply STEM, so that STEM can lead to optimal results through good stewardship, through good leadership and governance, and appreciating the value of the endowment of human beings as well as the environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Professor Shadrach Chikure, please can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Winifred. So nice to see you. My name is Shadrach Chirikure. I am a professor of archaeology in the Department of Archaeology, University of Cape Town. And I also hold a British Academy Global Professorship in the School of Archaeology, University of Oxford. I work with ancient technologies, and which is also a very interesting intersection point with the STEM. What technologies are indigenous to Africa, and how can we apply them to ensure that we achieve the needs of the present generations without compromising the needs of the future? Thank you.
Martin Biwalia, please can you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Winfred, and Greetings to all the participants and fellow panelists. As introduced, my names are Martin Wadia. I'm actually an engineer by training and done a lot of work in that area. I'm currently heading a directorate in the African Union Development Agency responsible for science, technology, and innovation. And my passion in this context and linked to STEM is actually the connection between science, policy, and practice. And actually, as African Union Development Agency, our core responsibility is how to bring knowledge in terms of innovations to address the continent's development challenges. And this is where STEM, this is where science, this is where innovations comes in. And in the STEM network is actually very much in the right place in terms of bringing this capability available. And we're actually in the African Union Development Agency very passionate about homegrown solutions, and the advancement of STEM is where we find that. So thank you so much, and looking forward to good discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Martin Biwalia. Thank you so much, Professor Shadrach Chikuri. Thank you, Dr. Beatrice Njenga and Sikelo Dube, for introducing yourself. So right now, in order to set the context of this conversation, I would like us to, just to define what sustainable development means to us. So Sikelo, what is sustainable development to you? What's your perspective of sustainable development? Because different people have different perspectives. Can you unmute yourself, Sikelo Dube?
Thank you. To me, sustainable development is any development that will ensure that we have a safer and cleaner tomorrow. To me, that is sustainable development. In anything that we do, is it good today? Will it be good tomorrow for the generations to come?
Thank you. Thank you for that definition. Dr. Beatrice Njenga, can you also tell me what is your perspective on sustainable development?
Thank you for this question. Sustainable development, to me, presupposes a certain level of development at which, when a country arrives, it should be such that every good thing can be sustained in terms of human development status, the environment, and other resources, without depleting the supportive systems beyond their capacity for replenishment. That's a mouthful. And that level has to include equity intragenerationally as well as intergenerationally. And I dare add that these systems are supported and regenerated through STEM-based skills and knowledge in the hands of people imbued with values of justice, fairness, integrity, and responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. That was really detailed. Thank you so much for that. Professor Shadrach Chikuri, please can you explain what is your perspective on sustainable development? Everybody has a different perspective. What is your perspective?
I think I share a lot of understanding with my other colleagues. The most important point for me is that our resources are limited, and that our activities in terms of meeting our everyday needs, our luxuries, and our other needs, our activities, they can harm our home. That is the earth. So sustainable development then means that we have to meet our own ongoing needs in the present without compromising the needs of the future. So that is my understanding of sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much, Professor Chikuri. So Martin, can you tell us what your perspective is on sustainable development?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I'll put sustainable development under four terminologies. One is a livelihood at the very top of what sustainable development, and by livelihood, I mean prosperity I mean people, and that comes in the center. And around that is the issue of productive systems that are able to put resources in the pocket of people, into the government fiscus, to be able to provide the public services. And as colleagues have said, in the manner that doesn't override the natural systems. We need to operate and function within given parameters of what the earth, what the world provides for. And that is how I will actually present sustainable development. And lastly, I said before, the last one is that it can't be done from outside. It's an inherent system. So you need the capability to deliver sustainable development to exist within that local system. The people, the environment, and the systems for economic growth in terms of wealth creation. Over.
Yes, so thank you so much. So I really like the fact that you have said that there are three components: the people, the environment, and the system, and you know, and ensuring that there's no compromise. So there's kind of a balance, you know. So tell me, what does sustainable development, Martin? This question is for you. What does sustainable development address on a high level?
Yeah, actually, this is what I'm saying. Actually, what the drive for sustainable development, and looking at it broadly, is that the continent, and probably let me say the world, had to deal with three factors. One is to deal with the issue of poverty. Number two is to deal with the issue of inequality. And number three was to deal with the finite natural resource base. It's not infinite, and we need to bear in mind that whatever we use, actually the earth, the world has got a system by which it's able to regenerate itself. Now, if we stay within that space, then where probably things will be okay. But what we know, and especially in the last few decades, we're very easily going beyond the rate, the level at which the earth is able to regenerate itself. So sustainable development is about bringing it back into our means to exist, to deliver prosperity, and deliver it in the manner that is inclusive, in the manner that is actually sustainable. And the sustainability part of it, actually, I would sometimes use the word resilient. It's not just natural systems, it's not just the water, earth, soil, it's actually the entire system, the whole biodiversity, including people in there, is actually an integral part of it. Okay.
So thank you so much. I do not know if anybody in the panel discussion, the panel would like to add to that. Does anybody have anything to add to that? If not, I will leave you on the hot seat and ask you some more questions. Does anybody have anything to add to that? I don't see anybody raising their hand. So what is the relationship between, actually, I think I see Sikelo. Sikelo, you turned on your video. Do you have something to add to what he shared, what Martin shared
Yes.
about what sustainable development addresses?
Yes, I
Because he
just
talked
wanted to,
about the people, the environment, and the systems, and ensuring that there's balance and one is not being depleted at the expense of the other.
yes, I just wanted to mention the fact that all this that we do towards sustainable development is for a resilient future. And I want to say we cannot talk about it without putting the youth at the forefront. That is my addition to all the comments that have been made.
Okay, thank you so much. So what she's added is that we have to ensure that the youth have a voice and that they're included in the whole ecosystem.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. So Martin, back to you. What is you talked about the fact that you work for the AU, the African Union. What is the relationship between sustainable development goals and the AU 2063 goals? I know that the AU 2063 2063 goals seem to have sprung from the Sustainable Development Goals, or the other way around. I think it's actually the other way around. The Sustainable Development Goals came from the AU 2063 goals. So can you dive a bit deeper and unpack this and tell us what the relationship is between the Sustainable Development Goals and the AU 2063 goals?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, just like you're saying, an historic fact, unlike the MDGs, Africa was very, very well organized in the development of the SDGs. And that work was done actually prior to the convening of the UN in terms of coming up with the SDG. And Africa did prepare and actually submit what was called a common position on the SDG. And that in itself was quite telling, was significantly impacted on what we now have as the 17 goals of the SDG. We have done some kind of mechanical positioning between the 7 aspirations of Agenda 2063, the 20 goals of Agenda 2063, and the 17 goals of the SDG. And you actually find that over 95%, 96% is hand in glove. And where they differ is actually very clear areas where, for instance, the African Union's Agenda 2063 is talking about some cultural aspects that are unique to Africa. And you can understand why those cannot be global intentions. But all and above, and especially on the key issues that relate to economic growth and development, these are hand in glove. And what we did in Africa is also to make sure that for the countries, the 53 member states of Africa are not implementing Agenda 2030 or the SDG and then go and implement Agenda 2033. Actually, for them, it's important that is one thing. And this has been domesticated in their national development plan. So they're implementing one thing. They're implementing the national development plans, and then they are taking care of the SDGs, taking care of Agenda 2033. Now, like I said, there is quite a lot of synergy among those. And just to conclude by saying key issues on both of them is eliminating poverty and inequality, is advancing economic growth on parameters that doesn't cut the branch you are sitting on. And I'm talking about the environment, I'm talking about climate change. Because if we do not pay attention to that, then in fact, the earth will go on. It's us that will perish. So we don't cut the branch that we are sitting on. And three, actually, just to emphasize, Stella was talking about the youth, which is very important. But at the end of the day, is actually that whole ecosystem. You use the word ecosystem, and I like that in the sense that it's actually humanity as a whole needs to be at the center of that. The youth, the women, the adults, and of course, why Stella is bringing the youth is that sometimes, many times, we try to take things for granted, especially where women and youth are concerned. But we need to be intentional, we need to be deliberate on those aspects as well. Of that.
So thank you so much. Let's unpack that a bit, and so that people understand clearly. So the SDGs 2030, this came after the AU 2063, and you talked about the fact that the AU 2063, that there are 20 goals, and the SDGs, there are 17 goals. But together they work hand and what did you call it, hand in glove, to really look at it, look at sustainable development from a very comprehensive perspective, looking at both the women, the youth, economic growth, fighting poverty, inequalities. So is that kind of a summary of what they address on a very high level?
Actually, we have clustered the 20 goals of Agenda 2063 into 4 segments. All the 20 goals relate to these 4 things. they relate, number one, and it's not in I'm not putting it in any order, but you can say in this case that at the very top of that four is the prosperity and improved livelihoods. So if you look at the 20 goals of Agenda 2033, you look at the 17 goals of SDG, they will relate to objectives, to intentions that relate to improved livelihoods, better standards of living, and prosperity for people. The other three, in terms of Agenda 2033, is that the second one relates to wealth creation. Mm-hmm. And I put that and I use that terminology deliberately because it's about value additions, about creating wealth into the economy in terms of public fiscus, but also into the pockets of the people in terms of incomes, either by jobs or entrepreneurship. And again, that is critical. Now, the third one is about capacity and institutions to create this wealth. So we need to generate, to build the capacity, the ability, the institutions to actually generate and sustain a generation of wealth connecting to prosperity. And this is where, like we said in the beginning, STEM comes in, because STEM is about enabling the capacity, the innovations, the systems, and it's not just hard technology, but it's also management capability to actually deliver economic growth and development and improved public service delivery. And the fourth one and last one is that you do all these three things in the manner that is consistent and respects natural systems in terms of environment, in terms of climate, and actually in harmony with the natural equilibrium, as they say. So this is how we categorize the 20 goals. And when you look at them, they should be relating to one or more of those four things. Over.
Thank you so much for that. You know, some days ago, I went to a career fair and I was really impressed by the youth and how they are so passionate about environment and climate change, you know, talking to a 10-year-old who was already well versed about COP26 and really the fact that the youth have to stand up to protect the climate because they wanted to ensure that they have an earth that can meet their needs. So I really like the fact that you brought that up and what Sikelo said about ensuring that the voices of youth is heard in this whole AU 2063 and SDGs, you know. So tell me, what sort of challenges in terms of implementation, what sort of challenges are countries and especially member states in Africa, what sort of challenges are they encountering in implementing systems and processes to meet these goals? Whether it's the SDGs, because they work hand in glove, SDGs or the AU 2063. What sort of challenges are they encountering and how can we mitigate them?
Yeah, thank you. I think before I answer that question directly, let me just make one point about the youth, because sometimes we present the youth as a future concept. Those people who are youth now, tomorrow they will be adults, but youth continues. And therefore the youth is not a future undertaking, it's a today and now issue. And therefore that sometimes makes a difference in terms of what you do and how you do it. The youth is not about tomorrow, it's about today. Coming to your question, we have as a continent a lot of challenges. At the core of those challenges, in my view, is capacity, because that connects to accountability. And capacity, I'm talking about especially institutions, as well as skills. And of course, they go together, management skills, technological skills, and systems that are able to optimize the value of intellectual capability of the continent, which exists massively, management capability, which exists, and of course the institutions all the way to the household. And here I actually want to also to emphasize in terms of institutions, the sub-national level institutions, community level organizations, frontline associations that are involved in the day-to-day real issues of making the economy to function. So we have one key issue is a capability issue that connects, as I said, to aspects of accountability, aspects of exploitation of our resources, and allocating them in the right place at the right time for increased value for money in our resources. And by resources, I don't just mean natural. I'm also talking about services today. I'm talking about communication. I'm talking about intellectual capability that is also very, very important. And this is why in Africa, when you look at the continental free trade area, is actually about means that are how to harness the collective capability and use that to provide some checks and balances and some push and pull power that allows those power relationships to actually deliver the greater good for us all.
So thank you so much for that. You know, you talked about institution, and I know I have two subject matter experts that work in institutions of learning where capacity building is their forte, is their strength. So I would like Professor Shadrach Chikure and Dr. Beatrice Jenga to please join this conversation. Let's dive a bit deeper into really looking at institutions which Martin has talked about. He has talked about capacity building and really talked about the role of STEM and how STEM plays a part in capacity building. So I will appreciate if Professor Chikure, if he joins this conversation, Professor Shadrach Chikure. Thank you so much. So my question is for you, Dr. Beatrice. What mechanisms are available to ensure that STEM and its impact on sustainable development are systematically factored into the work of governments and other development players, including CSOs and private sector? That question is for Dr. Beatrice.
Yeah, it's a big question. I think where it begins is having a STEM policy. A STEM policy is important and useful, although this can be incorporated into the education policy or the science, technology, and innovation policy if it's considered valuable. And it must also feature in the overall policy of a country, complete with performance indicators and budget lines. And it must be noted that STEM policies can be negatively disruptive if divorced from the overall development policy that is hinged on a national ethos, national heritage, national values, and responsible citizenship, etc., while having a multi and intersectoral perspective for STEM as a problem solver through innovation, e.g. in food production, in health, energy, water, industrialization, etc. STEM as a value adder in minerals and other resources, as a livelihoods and wealth generator in employment and entrepreneurship, etc. So this way, STEM would take on a local characteristic and definition, being mindful also of local challenges, strengths, and opportunities, as well as aspirations. And this would enhance the chances of that intersectoral collaboration to optimize the value of STEM education, STEM skills, and STEM research. And if this is the way STEM is addressed and STEM education is approached, then everybody would be on board because their perspectives would have been taken on board. What is valuable in the country would have been taken on board, and there would be, of course, a budget line for it. This is the backbone of ensuring that everybody is able to participate in harnessing the value of STEM for development.
Thank you so much for that. Professor Chikure, would you like to add to that? The question really is what mechanisms are in place to ensure that STEM and its impact on sustainable development is systematically factored into the work of government. And Dr. Beatrice has really talked about STEM policies. So do you want to expand on that or take it from a different perspective?
No, I think my colleague has done a great job in terms of raising the significance of the policy dimension. And just to build on that solid platform that she established, yes, there are good mechanisms at different levels, as Martin has also mentioned earlier on, but just that sometimes we talk more than we do. So we also need a culture of implementation. And so what also came out of Beatrice's contribution was that there is need to be inclusive, and for these policies to be all-encompassing, linking the regional, the local, the national, as well as the international. And there is also, in terms of inclusivity, there is women and the vulnerable. They are a key member of society, very often marginalized because of patriarchal tendencies. So that also needs to be given the spotlight. So just to round up on this issue, I think the mechanisms are there, the policies are there, but the challenges really are in terms of implementation, and how do we instill the culture of sustainable development based on African mindsets, and how do we ensure that the different sectors of the government communicate effectively. The education feed into policy, economic policy feeds into job creation, and that everything works as part of an integrated system. I think if we implement the mechanisms that we have got a good start as Africa.
So thank you so much for that. Let's dive in. I'm going to take a segue here. Let's dive a bit deeper into that. I have a bias for action, and so I'm always into community building, coalition building. I'm doing projects, to ensure that the ideas that we discuss, that those ideas turn into projects that actually impact the communities where people reside. So you said that that's one point you brought out. So tell me, if you wanted to really look at this bias of action, what would be your recommendation in ensuring that all these policies, all these discussions, all these great takeaways, that they really affect people at the grassroots level? How would you go about doing that? How will you ensure that these things are being implemented?
So obviously, this is a multi-dimensional issue, which also requires a multi-faceted solution. But I think we need to go to the basics. We need to go to the drawing board. The first thing is that STEM is not a foreign concept, right? Beatrice mentioned the significance of African heritage in anchoring African development, which is one of the action items in the AU Agenda 2063. So we need to understand that we have been doing most of these things that are under the umbrella of STEM. So what we simply need to do is perhaps to be a little bit more proactive engagement with the youth. So starting with children when they are still young across all the educational levels. And then we also need to ensure that policies at the right levels are all dovetailed. And then we have skills development. And we also need to be mindful, for example, of the impact that colonialism had on Africa. For example, going back to one of Martin's earlier points related to the African continent's free trade area, where if you are in Zambia, you cannot go to Angola without a passport, you cannot do all of these things. So the more these barriers are removed, I think that will make it easier to make STEM an enabler for sustainable development, mindful of the fact that communities have been doing some of these things, perhaps not in the degree that we expect, but let's build from that foundation.
Okay, thank you. I like that. I think one of the things I said during my opening remark is that for innovation to continue at its pace and continue to make an impact in the society, we need systems thinking and policy change. So I really like the fact that you brought that systems approach, that we need to look at the whole ecosystem and include everybody, and so that this policy is really impacting people at the grassroots level. So another question for you, Professor Shadrach, is, what can the government of African member states, you work in an educational institution, and so what can the government of African member states, what can they do to ensure that STEM education and its role in shaping Africans' mindsets on sustainable development is being embraced totally by all institutions of learning within the African context?
So the thing that I will repeat the point that I made earlier, which is a good starting point is to acknowledge the fact that STEM is not a foreign concept, and that African communities of all time periods have been involved with engineering, they have been involved with the science, they have been involved with mathematics and other physical sciences, such as chemistry. So the key thing then is that African countries are confronted with challenges with water, challenges with inequality, challenges with pollution, and so on. So how do we solve those problems? Right, STEM allows us it gives us an opportunity to innovate and to solve those problems. So what we need to say to African governments is that no, you need not struggle with addressing challenges with water, with addressing challenges with job creation. That's why STEM is there. We just need to ensure that we have good policies. As Beatrice mentioned, we need to resource that so that our education responds to our job creation needs, and our job creation needs sweat the taxes that we need to feed into the fiscus, and that systems thinking that you mentioned can then roll in, and then we can have a very stable system where we can meet our own needs today, tomorrow, as well as in the future. It's all in the mindset. We need to change that mindset and acknowledge that yes, STEM is not foreign. It was with us, it is with us, and we need to use it to solve the challenges that we are facing today and that we will face tomorrow.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I know one of the things that is a recommendation is to really look at institutions of learning and giving them STEM accreditation. So even if you're looking at elementary schools, for them to embrace the whole idea of STEM, for them to embrace the concept of project-based learning, one of the things is setting up standards bodies and ensuring that these schools you can measure them and say, oh, this school is STEM accredited, and that's one way the government can encourage institutions of learning to embrace STEM into their whole curriculum. A question for you, Dr. Beatrice: how can African member states, how can they be encouraged to use that STEM philosophy of systems thinking? How can they be encouraged to use that to inform policy making, just in order to ensure sustainable well-being of generations? So how can we encourage them to use that whole idea of systems thinking, which is at the core of STEM, the idea of design thinking, human-centered design? How can we encourage them to use that in their policy making? How can we use STEM to drive policy?
Thank you so much for that question, and especially for talking about STEM as a philosophy and as an approach, because one of the challenges with STEM is if it's pushed from outside, either as an acronym for the 4 subjects, but it could also be an approach that distills some transferable knowledge and skill from those disciplines and incorporates them in any other subject. So the contextualization is very important. Governments have to be encouraged to develop their own local definition of STEM approaches. Some add an A so that it is STEAM, because the idea of creativity and even design thinking, some people may say these are STEM attributes, but STEM subjects are not necessarily the only career subject. So looking at the backbone of STEM thinking, as you call it, the design thinking, the creativity, being analytical, critical thinking is very important. So STEM has to be presented as all that, as opposed to a particular set of subjects, because without including global and social awareness, local, regional, and global communities, etc., values and customs, futures thinking, STEM skills and knowledge are not likely to have the impact that we would be looking for. So yes, encouraging local contextualization, and then encouraging also innovation in the way that STEM approaches are incorporated in schools. We want to avoid overdoing the hands-on activities at the expense of deep science. There are levels. There's technical, vocational, and vocational education and training that is at different levels, even in basic education, secondary education, etc. But we also need the higher level of technology and engineering. And all these, our government should know that all of them are important. It's not the idea of giving up one strand of learning for the sake of another, but incorporating all these things that are important, because we need the science, but we also must have the values. You need the technology, but you also must be able to engage with society in order to introduce a new technology, so that technical solutions don't end up being, shall I say, Frankensteins, so that we have then to invest so much to counter their impact, or technologies that would end up making one country over-dependent on others, and in particular Africa. For instance, the supersedes that entrench dependence, so that you have to keep going back to the person who developed those seeds. That is surely a lack of integrity, because the status of human beings who are having to depend on others for something as basic as food seed is undermined, really. So yes, STEM must be within context, and it must incorporate all the other subject areas that are important for coexistence, responsible citizenship, and values.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think one of the challenges you mentioned really is this idea of understanding what STEM is about. Is STEM an acronym? What does it mean within the African context? And so raising awareness, educating member states, policymakers, educating them about STEM, educating them that STEM really is a philosophy. It doesn't do away with science. It doesn't do away with your chemistry, your physics, and your mathematics, but really it's an application of those concepts. So when policymakers begin to understand the whole idea of STEM, and they begin to include people who, like Martin Biwoye, who explains that he's a mechanical engineer, incorporating those people within their policy teams as part of their working groups, that is one way we can really ensure that STEM is driving policy, is informing policy. You are actually bringing people that are STEMists, that's what I call them, people who are actually trained in STEM. You are including them in in groups where policies are being written. So that is definitely one way, you know. I know that when I ask a lot of people about STEM, what is STEM? People give me different things. So I know awareness brings change. First of all, we have to educate them about what STEM is. So another question I have for you is, and I think I will include Sikelo now in the discussion. I know that we started this a bit late, so I'm going to include Sikelo. Sikelo, please, can you come on to this discussion? So, and I will ask the question. I will appreciate if Sikelo is spotlighted and included in the discussion, and Shadrach and Beatrice, please stay on. My question is, as an integral part of enhancing domestic capability in offering quality STEM education, are there opportunities for national and transnational solutions so that the UN SDGs can be met? I would appreciate it if Sikelo, if you can join this conversation, please spotlight Sikelo, include Sikelo in the panel discussion. Sikelo, this question is for you. As an integral part of enhancing domestic capability. So we've talked, when I talked with Martin, we were talking about government, we were talking very high level, we were looking at the AUs, we were looking at the SDGs, we were looking at them from where they originated, what they are addressing, and then talking to Professor Shidrak and Dr. Beatrice, we dived a bit deeper to look at the institution to say, how can institution embrace all of these things that that Martin had talked about, you know, all these ideals, you know. So now we are diving a bit deeper into the grassroots level, into education, you know, diving still into education and really seeing that, you know, as an integral part of enhancing domestic capability in offering quality STEM education, you know, are there opportunities for national and transnational solutions so that the UN SDGs can be met? What have you seen at the grassroots level? Because you work at the grassroots level.
Yes, thank you so much for this question. And like you're saying, I work at the grassroots level. I want to start off with saying, as a student, when I was still at high school and university, I felt the curricula needed to be more practical. I felt the teachers did not have so much that I know now. And some teachers that I still go to visit, they still don't know as much as you know, they should, for them to pass on the information to students. So I think there's a big gap in terms of the general ecosystem. Like someone mentioned, that, you know, this is an ecosystem. It's not just one pillar that will complete the whole cycle. We need to start off with coming up with a framework that says, what is the foundation? Where do we start from? From the teachers to be trained on a national level, right? The curricula to follow what we want for the future, right? So some of the degrees that students are still doing, there are no opportunities for them already, right? So we need to really come up with a framework that is clear. As Africa, just like we have the Africa Free Trade Zone and we have Africa as one big community, how can the UN come in? How can we make sure that we have some standards, key performance indicators that are African-based? I also like what my fellow panelists just said, say some things should be contextualized in terms of the country. I totally agree with that. But at the same time, can we have things that are Africa-centric? A framework that we can all share at a national level, at a curriculum level, and as Africa. In so doing, we move together. Because at the end of the day, a student who's doing preschool in Zimbabwe ends up doing university in Kenya, and you know, you end up even working in America. So at the end of the day, we need a framework that we can all share, complete that ecosystem together, from the training of the teachers up to even the STEM theory being turned into ideas, and us working as an Africa to bring the ideas into innovation and even possibly startups that are going to solve problems in our community. So we need a framework that can be shared by all. And I feel this is where UN can come in and will play a pivotal role. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I know that that is kind of one of the things I talked about like having a standard, like a benchmark, maybe an organization. that will actually accredit different schools and say you are a STEM accredited organization. And once you have that sort of framework to accredit different schools, you are actually one of the things you are trying to do is to standardize STEM education and make it accessible to people. But let's dive a bit deeper into collaboration, which is the point I'm trying to bring about. I know you talked about framework. I know you talked about the fact that, you know, teachers are not well educated. They need to be retrained. They need to be made STEM ready. You know, they need to understand what STEM is really about, you know.
Right.
So you've talked about that, and you've talked about somebody being educated in elementary in one country and going to university in another country and being able to do that in a seamless fashion. But we are looking at the whole ecosystem. Are there opportunities? That's the question. Are there opportunities for national and transnational solutions? You know, so that, you know, on the domestic level, we can gain the capability we need to meet the UN SDGs. So are there opportunities for those sort of solutions? You know, what do you think? Do you want to take that question, or let me ask Dr. Beatrice that question? Dr. Beatrice, I see she's trying to, she has an idea. Dr. Beatrice, tell me, talk to me, tell me.
Yes, I'd like to begin just a little further back. The idea of frameworks and what my colleague Cello was saying, I totally appreciate and buy into that. In my previous life, as I used to be in charge of the education program at the African Union Commission, and of course, the whole ethos behind the AU is to do with unity and collaboration and cooperation across the countries. One of the one of the initiatives when I was there was the Continental Education Framework, the strategy, of course, science, technology, and innovation strategy. TVET also, there's a continental strategy that provides the, you know, elements for developing those frameworks and standards. We even started, and I know this work is ongoing, work on developing a continental qualifications framework, which would enable skills portability, not only geographically from one country to another, and Sichelo mentioned that, but also from different types of education, like from a TVET school to a regular university. Are you able to carry on that qualification that you have acquired? And STEM is expensive. And also the challenges that are solved by STEM-based knowledge and approaches are transborder. So it makes sense. It makes sense to seek to work in collaboration, to work across institutions in countries, some countries, for instance, I think in Kenya, in Egypt, they have model STEM schools. Yes. There's also an idea for having model TVET centers, which could serve, you know, regions, a group of countries, because it's really expensive to equip appropriately these institutions and facilities that are needed. So when you can bring, you know, pool resources and invest in one place, and all other countries or other schools nearby can make use of that, it makes even for STEM diplomacy, if you like. Because if you're having to collaborate for your young people to study, it would challenge you when you want to also, you know, be conflictual. So, you know, it helps to build those relationships. You're able to share expertise, share resources, and also e-learning. E-learning can make it possible to, you know, to make use of limited resources, as long as you can have sufficient internet connection so that you can reach other people with fewer or more facilities than one has.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I know, just looking at my notes, I know that there are quite a few strategies on the ground. There's the science, technology, and innovation strategy for Africa. There's the continental education strategy for Africa. You mentioned the TVET, the technical and vocational education and training strategies. And then you have strategies that target agriculture, you have strategies that target infrastructure development, you have
Yes.
strategies that target water development, and strategies that target energy development. And these things are they look at Africa as a whole, not just the different member states. So these strategies, using them as a framework, it opens the door for opportunities for this transnational collaboration. And so, what about businesses and what is the role of businesses? Where do businesses come in this whole ecosystem, the collaboration between businesses and the educational system? I know you are at the grassroots level, but both of you, Professor Shidrak and Beatrice, what of the academia and business collaboration? Where does that come in? What's the place for it, and what are the drivers to move that forward? So I would like Sikelo to start to respond to that question, and then I'm going to pick your brain, Dr. Beatrice and Professor Shidrak. Sikelo, please, can you answer this question? Why should the private sector be interested in advancing STEM education? What is the role for businesses? Because at the end of the day, the people being trained, Martin talked about capacity building being at the very core of the AU 2063 and the SDGs. And so if the people being trained, they are going to be part of the pipeline for businesses. So why should the private sector, why should they be interested? What is their role?
Yes, that's an interesting question, because also as a business person, I appreciate the need for business people to be involved in STEM. In STEM, in the idea of education, in STEM, in the idea of innovation and entrepreneurship, in STEM, in the idea of linking academia and industry. So where academia and industry meets, that's when great things begin to happen in a nation. Innovation cannot come from the industry, from workers who've been there for 20, 30, 50 years. It might, but it's rare. But if industry embraces that technology and the future is driven by STEM, and the best minds are the ones currently in the university, currently in the high schools, then industry finds themselves as a big player. The business people find themselves as a big player in terms of CSR, to go back and give back. Equip the school so that there's a higher standard of learning in a practical way. Equip the universities through scholarships and be more active in internship programs, because they understand that the future of their business is linked to STEM innovation and STEM education. So business has a big role to play. And this needs us to lobby, this needs us to advocate for that. As members of the STEM Knowledge Network, we understand better. We need to educate them. It's the only way they'll get to see it and be involved. Then it completes the ecosystem.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I know we are kind of running out of time, so I'm going to go with my next question. I really would have loved to ask somebody else, but let me go with my next question, which is kind of a last question, and then I will ask Martin to join the panel and just to give us his final thoughts, and everybody to give their final thoughts before I close the session out. So how much STEM education, I really like what you talked about the fact that business has a real critical role, and that the collaboration between business and education is very important. As a young engineer studying in Nigeria, in the University of Lagos, it was important that we did internship. So I had to do internship I think it was my third year, and I had to do internship in my fourth year, and I had to do a capstone project. This is over that's 4 decades ago. I can't believe I'm that old, but 4 decades ago, I had to do a capstone project in collaboration with industry. And those days, my project was on robotics and artificial intelligence. And so when I see robotics and artificial intelligence, everybody talking about it, I'm like, oh my goodness, we were really at the cutting edge of that technology. So that would not have been possible if I wasn't exposed in my third year to the industry, to understand how the theory I was being taught in school, how it applied to the industry, and what were the different ways of solving problems. So it's very important that business and academia, there's a handshake, so that not only are we giving the opportunities, as students giving opportunities to do internship and apprenticeship, but also that businesses are investing. They're investing in the universities. They're ensuring that the engineering machines are up to date. They're ensuring that the curriculum is up to date, that the curriculum is keeping at pace with technology. So I really like that. So my last question is, how much STEM education, if we go a bit deeper now and look at elementary, we've kind of really been staying at the higher level of education, which is tertiary education, which is Dr. Beatrice and Professor Shidrag's sweet spot. But if we go to the lower level and look at elementary education and look at middle school education, I think you call that secondary school education, how much STEM is already in the curriculum at present? Not a future thing. How much STEM is in the curriculum at present? That question really is for Sikelo. I know, Sikelo, you've left the panel, but please, I'll appreciate it if you can come back. In the meantime, can Dr. Beatrice answer this question? If you are aware, Dr. Beatrice Jenga, I would appreciate it if Sikelo comes back to the panel, to the spotlight. How much STEM is currently in the curriculum at present? And let us understand how far we have to go.
Thank you for the question.
Oh, sorry.
So you can go first, Beatrice. Okay.
It's okay.
Dr. Beatrice, please go for it, and then Sikelo, you can finish that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I was going to say there is STEM in the curriculum. In terms of policy, if you look at every government policy on education, STEM is mentioned to a certain extent, and that is STEM from primary, not so much early childhood, but primary school, secondary school, etc. The challenge is in the implementation, because as we said, STEM is expensive. You need the laboratories. You need the teachers to be trained, not because the teachers are not well educated, but because it's a changing field. It's an emerging area, and there has to be training and retraining. And even in that teacher development, it's costly. Teacher development centers have to be equally well equipped. So there is theoretically, but more needs to be done in terms of investment. And perhaps that's where industry comes in, because they're the biggest beneficiaries of the STEM skills and STEM knowledge, so that they have to contribute, whether it is in terms of money or, as Winifred said, in terms of curriculum, because they're the eventual consumers of the products of that STEM education. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. So Sikelo, what would you like to add to that?
Yes, I would like to say that is very correct. I do agree with Beatrice. To also add that the government has a big role to play. In other countries, you see that there are science levies. Schools are challenged to make sure that there is equipment. Just like if a school wants to buy a bus, the parents sit together and they put money and things like that. But the government needs to push also to say science, STEM is equally important. So the practical portion of the education can be expensive, true. But if there are structures that are put, if there are fundraising measures that are put, if there is a percentage of the national budget that is put towards advancing STEM education, so much more can be done. If the business world is also engaged, industries that have to do with STEM, they're also asked to pay certain tax towards STEM education. I've had an experience of going to DRC, going to Zambia, South Africa, and comparing with Zimbabwe. And I can tell you that the standards are so different when it comes to STEM education. We have been lucky in Zimbabwe because our curriculum was recently, tweaked to incorporate more STEM and a practical approach. We've been lucky. But so many countries are still so behind, where you see education up to university not encouraging as a standard that a child should go past the laboratory. You get to university and you've never held a beaker or a test tube. So a lot still needs to be done, which is measurable. A lot of talk is there, a lot of policy on black and white paper and printed could be there, but what are the key performance indicators and what is really on the ground? It's a different story. Yes.
So thank you so much. I'm going to bring this conversation to an end. I would like to tell, I am very encouraged with what a lot of entrepreneurs are doing within Africa. I'm building the African EduTech Network, and Sikelo is actually on the network. And I see entrepreneurs really coming up with very innovative ways to actually reach students and make online learning available to them, and make STEM education part of curriculum, and really reaching out to schools to educate them what STEM education is about, and really using the things that are actually within the community, the resources that are in the community, to actually design projects so that students can become STEM ready. So I'm really impressed with what entrepreneurs are doing in terms of bringing STEM into the curriculum of schools. So thank you everybody for this conversation. We'll be bringing it to an end. I would appreciate it if Martin joins this conversation just very quickly. If you have one last word, what is your last word concerning how STEM can shape the mindset of Africa in the area of sustainable development? Just one last word, or maybe one last sentence, just one sentence, so that we can bring this conversation to an end. Martin, I will appreciate it if you join this panel discussion. Dr. Beatrice, can you tell me one last sentence about how STEM, the role of STEM in shaping the mindset of Africa on sustainable development? Just one summary statement.
Yes, can I go?
Yes.
Martin here, yeah. Actually, for me, and thank you so much to the panelists, very valuable input. I'll conclude just 3 points. Number one, let economic growth, inclusive development with people at the center be the pulling factor for STEM. That should be what gives us the rationale why STEM, what STEM, and how STEM. Number two is that we need to invest to focus on how do we domesticate STEM in other cultures, in other economies may not be STEM for Africa. And even within Africa, you have very diverse economies, cultures, and all that. So domestication of what STEM we need needs a very deliberate effort. And this relates to problem solving, to enabling within those local situations. And lastly, is that within STEM, or as we advance STEM, let it be at the core of the connection between education and industry. Over.
Thank you so much. So please, the other panelists, can you just make one sentence because we are running out of time? So thank you so much, Martin. That was very powerful. I really appreciate it. Dr. Beatrice, you have one last closing statement?
Yes, I believe one of the important aspects that STEM and STEM approaches have brought on board to bear is that our education system must incorporate experiences that will develop in our young people as well as the old ones, an inquiring outlook, problem solving, critical thinking, that is the capacity to be reflective and analytical, creativity, of course, functional numeracy at different levels, and design thinking that you mentioned. And with all that, we must not forget the issue of values, because that is what will make STEM have a positive impact through good stewardship of our resources, natural or otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So again, just a very short, concise statement. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Professor Shadrach, can you just add to that, please?
Just to echo the words that have been said thus far, thank you so much, Winifred, and the fellow panelists. I think for what I would say is that STEM is not for an individual. It is not for us or for them, but it must be treated as an inclusive, and we must also allow the system to regenerate, for example, through incentives. We must incentivize the teachers, the learners, we must incentivize industry, and also we must build synergies across, across sectors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Sikelo, can you round up this discussion on what is your last statement on STEM? On promoting STEM and the role of STEM in shaping the mindset of Africa on sustainable development?
I would like to also agree with what my fellow panelists have said, that this is not an individual game. We need to build the ecosystem and build it as Africa. Fine, use human-centered design based on the local, on the national, issues. But at the end of the day, there is need for frameworks that we can share as Africa. There is need for us to work together to bridge the gap, even in terms of academia and business and industry, so as to work together towards, a resilient future, which is definitely powered by STEM.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for this time of discussion. One of the things that we've ascertained is that promoting STEM education, both within the member states and nationally throughout the continent, will really help Africa leapfrog so that they can actually meet the sustainable development goals and the AU 2063 goals. So you have heard throughout this 1 hour why STEM is very important in enabling Africa to meet these goals. So I really hope that you are inspired. I hope you are empowered. I hope that you are motivated to actually share the importance of STEM in your local school and to be part of policy making if you have that opportunity. Thank you. I appreciate you tuning in to listen to this discussion.